show brought to you by WP Relax. No matter whether you have an existing site, want to transfer your site, or need to start a WordPress site from scratch, we have a plan to suit your needs. So say bye-bye to WordPress problems and relax with WP Relax.
Hi everyone, this is Ahmed Al-Karimli and welcome to Be Efficient TV. The mission of this web TV show is to boost the efficiency of your business and life through tips and tricks from leading experts. And today I have with me Brant Cooper. He is a New York Times best-selling author of The Lean Entrepreneur, and he is the co-founder of the Moves the Needle. Welcome to the show, Brant.
Thanks, Ahmed. Good to be here.
Thank you. So how did you become an author and started this speaking and the startup, became a startup expert?
Good question. It's like all things, it's a little bit of luck, a little bit of timing. But I worked in a number of startups back in the 90s during the dot-com boom and early 2000s. And after I left my last startup, I was doing some marketing consulting, and it was really in the days when marketing and analytics was first becoming available. And so I was trying to bring some of the rigor of the engineering side of the house to the sales and marketing side of the house. So in other words, can we start tracking the return on marketing investment? So instead of what, in my view, used to be sort of this fluffy side of marketing, spending all of this money, whether or not it results in sales, we were trying to bring sort of some of this rigor that scientists and engineers tend to have over to the marketing side. And so I was blogging about that in 2008, 2009, and somebody said, well, you should really go read Steve Blank, who had written or compiled some lecture notes in the 4 Steps to the Epiphany, and he had invented this methodology called customer development. And Eric Ries was just starting to blog about the lean startup stuff, and it was very similar to my sales and marketing R&D, which is what I called my marketing service. And so I thought, well, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so I sort of jumped over to what those guys were doing. And it was really just a small number of us that were talking about the lean startup stuff.
He was talking about the why, you're talking about the how, right?
That's sort of what that's in the book for sure. But back then we were all kind of talking about everything. How does this work? And does it work for business to consumer as well as business to business? And we were all just trying to, bounce ideas off. And so then I ended up writing my first book, which was The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development, which was, this cheat sheet to Steve's book, but also introduced a bunch of other concepts like, lean startup and Dave McClure's pirate metrics and the concept of product market fit. And, we had a very target audience. There were startup people, mostly concentrated in Silicon Valley. So it was a very tight market segment. And the book did very well. And so that sort of, suddenly launched me into workshops and speaking. And, then, that book did well. So then the publishers start coming after you. So, I had a lot of ideas in that area, but also it was timing, so who would have predicted that all of this, turned into a career? I certainly didn't.
And when now you look at your future or career you think that you like to be more as an author, an expert and consultant, or to be as, let's say, a startup, guy or founder, or maybe consultant for startup? Which one you like more?
Right. So I don't like to do consulting for startups because they don't have much money, and I don't actually want to be taking money from them. So I do a lot of mentoring and advising, but I don't try to take money from them. I enjoy doing speaking engagements. I love being, being interviewed. I like being able to share some of the things that I've learned and some of the things I've written about. But, I'm also a product person. So that was in my startup days, was really about building products. So who knows? It's hard to predict the future. So maybe I'll get back to that. Or maybe we'll do both. I don't know.
What's your background before that? Like, you failed in these startups and you struggled and you wanted to learn more about this, area, so you become an expert in it. Take us through the story.
Well, so I've always been sort of a, hard to pigeonhole, kind of a jack of all trades, right? So I went to college, I studied economics, I also minored in English, so I did a lot of creative writing and wrote a novel after school. And but I also took calculus and chemistry and computer programming, and then sociology, psychology, history. So I was taking a little bit of everything, and my career sort of reflected that as well. So I was kind of the IT guy when I came out of college and got my first job. So I was part analyst, but also part, uh, you know, hey, take care of the computers and take care of the software and do a little database programming. So then I kind of became an IT manager, and then I joined my first startup as an IT manager. And then I started running the professional services group and helping sell the product. So I was converting from IT manager into more of a marketing and sales role. And then when I was at my second startup, I helped start a company that lasted, boy, only 6 months because of the dot-com crash. And then I joined another startup and I ran product management and marketing and business development. So I think, again, sort of like my college career, I had all of these roles inside of a startup, which gave me, I think, a lot of perspective on, how these organizations need to work together and when they have problems and what those problems are. So, I've had some successes. The last startup I was at, I helped grow revenues from like 3 to 6 million to 15, $18 million. And so we had a good run there. But I also know that I had a lot to learn and made some mistakes there too. And so I think it's a combination of you learn from successes, but I think you actually learn more from failures. And so I think that's you combine that then with my writing and sort of this analytical ability. I think
It works as a
hopefully,
package.
yeah, it comes as a package, and then hopefully that's what helps me articulate it in a way that other people can learn. And I think one of the points, maybe we'll get into this, but I think one of the things about the lean startup movement is really most of the concepts aren't new. Successful entrepreneurs have been doing some of these things forever, but I think that the timing is right again. I think that the way we can instrument our products and the way we can use agile development methodologies and the way that we can use social media for marketing, I think a number of factors have come together that makes this the right time for lean startup in particular. And the real genius, I think, in the end, around customer development and lean startup is that we can put it in sort of this teaching framework. It's the lexicon, and it allows us to write books and then go teach how people can implement this. And it's not like it's a blueprint. It's not a one size fits all, but it's teach the methodology so somebody can, digest it, understand it, and then kind of make it their own. So in the end, entrepreneurs will make it their own, and then that's what will lead to success, hopefully.
Then you've co-founded Moves the Needle. What's Moves the Needle and what's your role in it?
So one of the nice things that's come out of all of this lean startup is that large companies know that they need to move more quickly now in order to compete. And they need to jumpstart their innovation practices. And so Moves the Needle is really about bringing lean startup to large enterprises. And so we're working with some of the top brands in the world to teach them lean startup techniques and to also help them build the internal systems that support innovation and even teach new skills to leadership. So that's what Moves the Needle is all about, and that's sort of my full-time gig right now.
So it's like consultancy for big corporations to teach them some of the stuffs about startups?
That's right. We teach them how to be startups, while at the same time, how do they protect their core business? So it's not like you can just turn a large enterprise into a startup. They've got existing brand, they've got legal requirements, they've got compliance, they've got salespeople that know how to sell their existing products and marketing people that know how to market and keep their brand up. So those assets actually have to be protected. You can't just turn that into a startup. But on the other hand, there are different business practices in order to innovate again and to move faster. So the way we bring these methodologies in is to be able to do both of those things simultaneously.
Talk about in your material about becoming a visionary, how to become a visionary and creating a business.
So usually the way I introduce this is that the visionary, the way we know about it or understand it now is really a myth. It's perpetuated by the media. We love to tell stories here in the United States. I don't know how you tell me whether this is true uh, in your neck of the woods as well. But here in the U.S., we love to tell stories about this lone wolf solo entrepreneur that's tinkering in his garage and then has this epiphany, this light bulb goes off, right? And suddenly they've figured out this product that's going to be successful, and all they have to do is build it, and then the market will beat a path to their door, and then suddenly this overnight success, and they become a billionaire, and So this is we tell this about. Obviously, Steve Jobs is usually the big example of this, but you can go back to Thomas Edison and Henry Ford, and really fundamentally the story's not true. Usually these people are cobbling together existing technology. They do have some insight, and they have a vision about how to apply that insight. But inevitably, the market will tell them something different, that they have to change something out of that insight. It's something, part of that vision has to change. And so I think that a vision is important in order to rally the company and rally people around the idea. But the real breakthroughs come when you're able to listen to the market and choose where the market's going to pull the company to get the big success. And so that's the trick. And so in my
So the trick to
definition,
become flexible with the market and move where the wave is taking you?
right. So it's not that you must stick with your vision, that you must have conviction about your vision. Now, you do have to try to break down walls, right? It's not being so flexible that, the first whim that you hear about, then you steer the whole company to that whim. That usually doesn't work either. You're trying to be really breakthrough innovative. You have to try to bust down walls. If it was easy, the innovation would have happened a long time ago. So innovation is hard. And so you have to persevere. But at some point, what you find in these successful businesses is that you uncover the market is actually pulling you, strong pull in a particular direction. And that's where the big opportunity is. And so in my estimation, the true visionaries are the ones that don't stick to their original vision. The true visionaries are the ones that are able to find that strong market pull and have the flexibility, as you suggest, to move in that new direction. And not only that, but the visionaries are the ones that hire brilliant people, like Steve Jobs had John Ives, who was really the designer of the iPhone, and you have these different and Wozniak for that matter. You surround yourself with these people that are strong and have strong opinions and strong skills. So it's not just this solo lone wolf entrepreneur that comes up with these great ideas. It's about the team. It's about collaboration. It's about taking things that already exist and putting them together in a new way.
So you have a vision, a bit of hard work, luck, and flexibility, and you move on with the market. How about how to create the business model for this vision?
So in my opinion, and I'm not sure what others think about this, but in my opinion, having a deep customer empathy, understanding your customers deeply, understanding the problem that you're trying to solve will determine the other aspects of your business model. And so, for example, if you chose a business model from the outset, right? You filled out your business model canvas and you've got particular partners in mind, and you've got, this is the way I'm going to sell it. I'm going to sell it online. I know how I'm going to reach them is through social media. And you have all of these ideas about your business model. But then what you find is that your customer segment are people that require a field sales team instead of an online sales, and require a different set of partners, maybe resellers or systems integrators. Maybe they need hardware instead of just software. Those answers actually come from the market segment that you end up going towards. So in my estimation, predicting all of those things beforehand is sort of just like writing a business plan that fails in the first day of being out in the market. So it's fine to speculate on that, to document your assumptions based on all these business model aspects. But in my estimation, those things fall out of where the market pulls you, that it's the market segment that will determine how you're going to market to them, how you're going to sell to them, what partners you need in order to create this whole product, as Jeffrey Moore would call it.
So it's all about testing before like putting all your money in the startup. You need to be careful at the beginning, test the water, test your customers, survey them before you invest more and, raise capital more.
Right. So I think this was the birth of customer development. I mean, Steve Blank, and I've lived through this as well. Steve Blank would describe the story where back in the day, back in the 90s and early 2000s, you would raise millions of dollars and spend years engineering and hire your salespeople and your marketing people and your PR agency. And you would literally be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And the only thing you would have to show for it is a bunch of code. You didn't know whether anybody even wanted the product, and you didn't know how to market, and you didn't know how to sell to them. So that creates a lot of waste. And so the whole point of Lean Startup is to eliminate the waste of doing startups like that in the wrong way. And that you need to learn what it is that you need to do first before you execute on it.
But don't you think now with more competition and more perfection for the startups, you need to show something at the beginning that you are really good and better than, especially in the online and tech space. Now you're competing with the entire world, not like when you have a shop that you compete with your neighborhood or the mall or so it's tough. I mean, you need to build the startup into a certain stage to show that you can satisfy some customers.
Right, but so building it means getting it out to your customers, right? I mean, if you just keep it internally, how do you know you've built anything that's more perfect than what's out there? You only know based upon getting it in front of your customers. I guess I would like to emphasize, though, and people get this wrong about Lean Startup, is when you have your minimum viable product, the minimum features that fulfills the promise that you've made to your customer, it doesn't mean early on that you launch that to everybody. It means that you're launching that to early adopters so you can learn whether you've built enough to actually make the product viable. So when people talk about launching your minimum viable product, that doesn't mean doing a marketing campaign and a PR campaign and trying to get it in front of as many people as possible. It means you've already discovered and validated part of your ideas with your early adopters, and then you're putting the minimum viable product only in front of the early adopters in order to learn that you've created the value that you think you have.
Do you use any tools or techniques to survey the market that you can recommend?
I actually love analog tools right now. I've tinkered around with my own tools, so I don't really have a lot of recommendations around ways to automate or survey your customers. I really believe that feet on the street is the best way early on, and to really, buy your customers a cup of coffee, have lunch with them, go and see them in their environment so you can understand what issues they're really facing and what is we call it a day in the life. What does a day in the life of your customer look like without your product? And then can you imagine what a day in the life of the customer looks like with your product? And hopefully the difference between those two is great enough that the customer will actually, pay for that experience. So early on, I'm not worried about tools. I really advise people to go out there and interact directly and talk to the customers and get to know them. Bring them on as allies. Have them co-create the product with you.
So we started the company, we developed some customers. How we make them more, we build a loyal base of customers and we build this passion and connection with our customer base.
So I think that in my framework, the way I look at it is that you make a promise to your customer. So I'm going to solve this problem with my product. So the minimum viable product essentially is, what's the minimum number of features to fulfill that promise, i.e. that will actually solve that problem for that customer. People actually don't become passionate usually. There are exceptions, but people usually don't become passionate about you doing what you say you're going to do, right? That makes you, in my model, that makes you satisfied. Yep, they fulfilled their promise. I appreciate that, but of course that's what they told me they were going to do, and I gave them money for it. So that's the way it should be. Now, how I become passionate is when you do something above and beyond the Call of Duty. You make me feel good about myself. So the passionate part is sort of the aspirational element of your promise. So it's what is the impact that my product's going to have on your life? Is it going to make you a hero inside your company because you've solved these major problems, or you've dramatically reduced cost, or you've increased, network security or something like this? So is it going to make you a hero inside your company? If you're selling it to a consumer, is it going to make you a better spouse? Is it going to make you feel like a better parent, or what is the impact that your product's going to have in their life? Now, it's important to note you can't promise them that impact. You can't promise people will be made a hero or feel like they're a better father or something like that. But you aspire for this emotional impact, and that's kind of the journey that you're going to go on with your customer. What's important to think about in this regard is that this passionate element doesn't necessarily just come with the product. Sometimes the user experience is so over the top that you get passionate about a product, but oftentimes it's other parts of the business model, and that's why we talk about the brand. So it could be the packaging even. It could be how you market to them, like the content marketing that you do for them, or it could be the way you sell to them, or it could be your distribution. There's a number of other elements inside the business model that might be what invokes this passion. But the reason why you want to get to this passionate level is because those are the people that then talk about your product. They recommend you to their peers. They'll do case studies maybe, or testimonials. So essentially they're putting new customers into the top of your marketing funnel without you spending any money on marketing. And so I urge the audience to think about the difference between my customer being satisfied and my customer being passionate. And of course, you have to get to satisfied first before they become passionate. But they're really two distinct things, and you want to work and build the brand of your company to achieve this passion level.
Now, when you work with these big companies, like you try to turn the employees, there is some movements to turn the employees more entrepreneurial. How do you see that? It's not contradicting sometimes with the top management managing those employees, and they are even the CEO sometimes, or like VP he's still in the employee mentality. And also I want to know, like, what do you help these companies in the strategies as well, or only marketing and how to shape their branding?
Yeah, so it is tough, Ahmed. I think that what we look for right now is we look for companies that are already decided that they're going to do this. So they've probably read Eric Ries's Lean Startup book, and they've determined that this is the way that they want to move faster, to be more agile, to be more customer driven, and maybe they want to jumpstart their innovation practices. So at this point, I'm not in the business of trying to convince them that they ought to do this. So they come to us, they're sort of ready. We're still in early adopter territory ourselves. So we sell into all sorts of different parts of the organization. It's usually product teams or it's innovation teams. In some of the more advanced companies, we actually are engaged with organizations like the HR that is driving cultural transformation. And so the engagements with all these companies look a little bit different. Typically, our bread and butter is workshops, so that in over a 2-day period, we've actually dive real deep into using our particular framework for running rapid experiments, for engaging with customers and then running experiments. And it's very hands-on. So after the workshop, we hope that those employees can go back and apply those principles to their regular job the very next day. That's our hope. With other companies, we do what we call a virtual accelerator program. So maybe it's a 90-day program with a product team or an innovation team. And we, on a weekly basis, will mentor them, not unlike classic accelerator programs like maybe a Techstars, except that we're not there in person. But we have specific milestones that these product teams have to achieve, like you will go talk to 15 customers by next week, and we're going to check in next week to make sure that you've actually communicated with those customers. And then finally, we also do consulting around enabling the systems. So some of those support systems that I mentioned earlier branding, legal, compliance, we can work with those organizations to try to help them come up with guidelines that allow innovation and rapid experimentation to happen. And then, of course, we have to help build new leadership skills to also further the cultural transformation. So there's several layers of what we can actually do for these companies. But I think right now the bread and butter is hands-on, intensive workshop. What does this look like inside of an organization to do work this way?
What is a brand, and why and how it can help building a better business?
So this gets back to the passion discussion. So to me, a brand really is the relationship that you have with your customer. It's not what a customer's relationship is with your brand. That's sort of like branding. People often define brand using the word brand, right? It's like it makes no sense. So think about brand as everything that you do and actually everything that you don't do in relationship to your customer. So I like to point out, for example, Google never allows you tech support. You can't really get a hold of support people at Google. They've never done it that way. And that actually is part of their brand. It's okay. I think but it was a conscious decision. It may be that in your startup, what you decide is you're going to provide support. And as the CEO, you're going to even answer the phone or you're going to answer the email in order for you to learn more about your customer. I'm not advocating that, by the way. I'm just using it as an example. But that is your brand then. You're actually establishing the brand that you're the type of company that's going to provide that type of support. And so it's important to think as brand not just as a logo or, the company name or the tagline or the color palette, but it's everything that you do and even those things that you choose not to do that forms a relationship with your brand. And so the most successful brands are those that start with, here's the promise that you're going to make, like I mentioned before, this utility type promise, not a big, aspirational brand promise, but a very utility promise. I'm going to solve this problem with my product. Plus, what is this journey that you as a customer and me as a founder can go on that's going to have an impact on your life by using my product and you having a relationship with my company?
The business model. What's the myth of the brand genius?
Well, so the myth of the brand genius is very similar to the myth of the visionary. The myth of the brand genius is that creative person that says, no, there's no science about this. There's no rigor to apply to creativity. You must just believe in me because I have this, genius level creativity, and I'm going to come up with this marketing campaign, and I'm going to come up with this advertising campaign, and I know the color palette that I should use, and I know what your logo should look like, and these things are going to drive the relationship. These things are going to make what customers are passionate about. And it's just, I can't tell you how untrue that is. I think that was true sort of during the Industrial Revolution when it was, this communication was one way, right? So big brands, and I'm sorry, I can only think of, these brands in the United States, but it's like the TV show, The Mad Men, right? It's all about this advertising where we're going to take, a soap, a laundry detergent, and we're going to make you passionate about a laundry detergent, and we're going to make the mom feel special, and
it makes you stand out. That time no one was doing these stuff.
Right, exactly. And so the idea really is that mom would pass down to her daughter what soap she uses, and that was really what that loyalty looked like. But the world's changed, right? I mean, big brands can make one mistake now, and social media can take down that company virtually, right? So it's a two-way communication now. It's not this one-way broadcast message from corporate to consumer. It's a two-way conversation. And so that means that brands have to be listening as much as they have to be broadcasting. And that just changes everything. That's what a relationship is, right? You wouldn't have a relationship with your spouse if it was all one way. It better be two ways or you're in trouble. And it's the same thing here now with brands. It's a two-way communication, and that's why we call it a relationship.
What are the top 5 lean brand tips?
The top 5 lean brand tips. Well, so I have no idea.
Like one of your materials on the new book, there was kind of certain post about that. How about the framework, the brand framework?
Well, so the brand framework is really it's very similar to the lean entrepreneur. It sort of dovetails on that, but there's sort of three elements that you have to think about in terms of building your brand framework, and that is one, there has to be this invitation. So how are you going to get customers on board with this journey that you're going to take with them? And so that's really about your first engagement with the customer, and I think that again, sort of like going back to the myth. When you're a startup, the first engagement is not your logo. The first engagement really is around what the product is and what's the differentiation of your product, and also what's that experience going to be like, and maybe an introduction to what this emotional impact might be, what this journey might be. The second phase is how do you get them engaged in that relationship? So is there a way for them to be consuming as well as creating part of that aspiration? So this is, I think if you think about it in terms of social media, it's sort of an easy analogy that you want customers that are talking back to you, not just listening, and so they're engaged. They're maybe uploading photos using their product onto your Facebook page is like one example of how you might measure that type of engagement. It also could be testimonials in the business-to-business world. Here in the United States, pretty much if you want to get people on board, they have to be able to. They have to be able to provide you testimonials and that sort of thing. The third part of it is really how do they become advocates for you? And so again, this is how do they invite others to join in on that journey? And so part of that eventually ends up becoming maybe some of those branding elements, these artifacts that we talk about, and that really, but it's further down the road. And so it's key for entrepreneurs to think early on about what that direct relationship is. And so that's, human to human communication. And then based upon discovery of what really works in that relationship, then you can start automating it through marketing.
How to beat the past and learn to learn from the failures, from our failures. And tell me also more about the biggest failure in your life and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so I think that, so I have this theory that people confuse macro with the micro. So if you think about macroeconomics versus microeconomics, the macro is, and this is especially true internationally, but it's true, I actually think it's true in the United States once you get out of Silicon Valley. There's this talk about, fear of failure or a culture that doesn't accept failure. And I think that from a macro perspective, that's broadly true. I think that you get out of the United States, you get out of Silicon Valley or out of US tech hubs, I think people have that fear of failure. And I think that there is a culture that maybe doesn't accept that. But as long as there's been one entrepreneur, one from your local ecosystem that has succeeded, it shows you that you as an individual don't have to listen to the macro. It's really just up to you. And it's up to you as the individual to overcome whatever those obstacles are that are reflected in the macro. So if you as an entrepreneur accept the story that there's a fear of failure, not an acceptance of failure, you've just given in to that, right? But as long as there's one entrepreneur that's made it, that means that there's room for you to make it too. And so I really think entrepreneurs need to not listen to that. I think that generally policymakers, and people that are trying to build a community need to listen to that, because there are things that we can do to help overcome some of that. But as an individual entrepreneur, you need to simply ignore that and go bust down any wall that's stopping you from succeeding. So that's point one. Point two, I think, is that entrepreneurs often confuse the size of the change that they want to make with the first step towards making that change. And so the first step can be small, and you can take 10 small steps, and then you can look back behind you and see, wow, I've actually gone a pretty far way. And you actually start creating your own momentum that way. And so instead of worrying about, how hard it's going to be and all of these obstacles that are there, take the small steps that actually start getting you going, and then, take those challenges head on as they come when you need to, not worrying about them beforehand. Um, so I think that those are my best tips about getting forward. I bet you everybody out there today could think of one step that they could take that would start them or get them to their next step on their entrepreneurial journey. And it could be as simple as calling up somebody they think, or using LinkedIn or whatever works, uh, calling up somebody on the phone that they think would be a great customer for their product and inviting them out for a coffee or a lunch or a drink or whatever. That would be one small step that you could do. And you go and you meet with them, and you don't try to sell them, but you try to understand, does this person actually have the pain that I think that they have? And after you discuss that, you can say, well, here's my idea. What do you think about that idea? But that's only after you've discovered whether they have that pain. And if they don't have that pain, ask them for, well, do you know somebody I should talk to? It's a small step that everybody could take today, tomorrow. And so that starts the ball rolling.
How about your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
So my biggest failure in life, or my biggest failure as in business? I think my biggest failure in business is probably the, sort of the .com era startup that crashed miserably, right as the .com crashed. So, that was it. The company lasted only 6 months, and was actually kind of scary, because here we thought, the .com era was going to last forever. This is how foolish we were back then. And so we started a new business, and within 6 months, the job that I just had, which was a very stable job, and the CEO did not want me to leave, and kept on asking me back. But within 6 months, now I have no company and I have no job. And the economy has just, gone south. It's gone pretty bad. So it's actually pretty scary, but I was able to land on my feet and joined another startup and had a good run there for 3 to 4 years. And so I think that, I think what that teaches you is that, you are your own safety net. And if you sort of can believe in yourself that you're going to land on your feet because you're going to do what it takes to, to press on, then, that's what you do. So I was married and had 2 kids, I think. And so 1 or 2, and so, it's stressful, but I also think, you're going to do what it takes to move. And so I think it then gives you a lot of confidence moving forward, and you're able to look back and see what you did wrong, and hopefully apply that to the next startup, the next idea.
What's the best advice that you have ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. I have no idea.
What would you advise your younger self if you have the chance?
I guess I would have said go for it sooner. So
Take risk.
Yeah, take risks sooner. I mean, I kind of did it. I quit my first job and wrote a book. So I guess that was taking a lot of risk, but it was also kind of silly because there was no money in books.
Which book was that? The first one?
It was actually a novel, so it's never been published, and it was actually, not a very good novel. So
yeah, you switched through the research. You quit your job. You switched off for a couple of years. You wrote a novel, and then you moved on. Tell us more about that.
Right. Well, I think that I was always a very self-aware individual, and it was very clear to me, even after my first job, that what I didn't want was to work for other people. And so the way I put it now is that I think I was a bad employee, which is a good sign that you're, maybe should be an entrepreneur. And I don't mean bad employee in the sense of not doing work. It's really more about not
being satisfied at work.
Right. And not being very well managed, right? Not being very manageable, about always feeling like you know more than your managers. And so it's funny because I always got along with the CEOs, and it's probably because they were entrepreneurs. But ultimately, whenever there were layers built between me and the CEO, I became a horrible employee. But so I sort of knew early on that that wasn't going to work, and my first endeavor really was to go write the great American novel, and so that's what I did for a little while, and I just don't think I was number one. I don't think I was a very good creative writer. Number two, I don't think you really know much about the world when you're in your 20s. It actually takes some more time, but I don't know. I guess that was empowering in the sense that I knew that I could live a life without being just a, sort of a cog in a wheel. And I think that that's what drives a lot of entrepreneurs. I think then what happened was I spent the next, I don't know, 6 or 7 years as an employee in a variety of companies. And I think that those were years where I didn't maybe take as much risk as I could have, but those were also not the most. Those were sort of tough years in the U.S. as well. So it wasn't until a few years later that the .com stuff started happening. So maybe I could have made the switch a little bit earlier or started my own company. But yeah, I think when you're young and single, that is the time to go for it. A couple of times, I think anyway, at least to get some learning out of it.
How did you find the difference between writing nonfiction and fiction?
Yeah, so it's funny because I've never been a big business book reader, but the ones that I have read have really been career changing. And I think I would point out Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm and Clayton Christensen, Innovator's Dilemma, as being really the two most important books that I read early on. And they've instructed so much of what I've done since. I was lucky that my first book, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development, really kind of wrote itself. It took only 3 or 4 months, and it was because there was so much good content already out there. There was Steve Blank's 4 Steps to the Epiphany. There was Eric Ries and his blogs and what he was talking about, and Dave McClure and Sean Ellis and my co-author Patrick Vlaskovitz and myself and a bunch of other people that were providing, they were writing their own content. And again, I was kind of coming at this from the same place. So I think it was just, that was a pretty easy book. What was interesting about the second book, The Lean Entrepreneur, is it really came from my workshops. So starting with the customer development book, I did workshops all around the world for 2 years. And really a lot of the framework and the tools and the ideas around market segmentation came from my work with customers, which is very much sort of like what we say here is eating your own dog food, right? So it was very much that I was applying in my book what I was also teaching in my book. And so it was very customer driven and it was very iterative. And so it was being out there in the world working with entrepreneurs that really allowed me to develop this new content that was in the book, The Lean Entrepreneur.
How did you hit the New York Times bestseller list?
Well, it's almost the same answer. It's pre-selling the book. It's building a platform which started with the Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development. It was building and growing a platform and then pre-selling the book up until the launch.
How many copies it took you to hit the list?
I don't remember, 8 or 9,000
per week.
Right.
Why you chose to use lots of illustration and making and designing the book?
Well, probably why people always illustrate. I think if you can tell a story with pictures, I think it adds a layer to what you're writing, and so we're really proud of those the graphics in there, and they were done by the dinosaur fake Grimlock, and I actually think you can look and study those pictures, and you can get an idea of what the story is that he's telling in those pictures just from that, and so I think it enhances the text. And they're fun as well. So
publishing versus self-publishing, and if you have both options, which one you will choose?
So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think if you want to make money, you self-publish. I think that if you go back to then traditional publishing, it's a way to grow your platform, but you make a lot less money. Um, I think that right now, the only way to hit the bestseller lists, except for Amazon, but the only way to hit the other bestseller lists is through traditional publishing. As Amazon continues their domination, I think eventually that will change. But right now, the way distribution works and the way those bestseller lists work, using traditional publishers is the best way to make that happen.
Do you have any advice when signing a contract with a traditional publisher? And can you keep, let's say, the rights, give them the rights, let's say, for 5 years or 10 years, and then, like in the contract, and then you take back the rights?
Yeah, I didn't try that particular tact. I think that having a good attorney that has experience in the publishing industry is a good idea. So we used one who was both an agent and an attorney. We didn't use him for his agent part, but it also means that he understood that part of the game. So I think that you might be able to negotiate that. I'm not sure it's that relevant because I think that 5 years, 10 years down the road, it's not likely that you're going to make a lot of money from it anyway. So I think that I don't think that there's yet a lot of flexibility in the type of contracts that you're going to get with a traditional publisher. So I really think the decision really should go back to what is it that you're trying to achieve. And if you have a great market segment that you can reach, like we did with our first book, the fact that we knew how to get to Silicon Valley startups, we were part of that community. I think that gave us an advantage. And so if authors out there can identify a market segment like that, then self-publishing is a good way to start because you can build that platform. It's like building a mailing list. It's really treat your book like a startup. That's actually the best advice I can give. You can still go to http://cusdev.com and look at our first book, and the landing page looks like an old, SaaS startup type landing page. And so you have to think like a startup. You have to market segment like a startup. You have to bundle the book in packages just like a startup does. And when you're pre-selling it, if you get to that point, you can try crowdfunding. I think that's a good idea to raise some money that actually pays for some of the marketing. But people don't buy just books. If you can sell workshops, interviews, workbooks, try to think of things that you can sell if you're self-publishing, especially. But think about other things that you can sell along with the book. And I think that's where authors find traction today.
Can you share with us the agent attorney name, if you don't mind?
I don't have it offhand. Happy to share it with you, and maybe there's another way you can get it to your audience.
Thank you. We'll put it on under the interview. What are the tools or softwares that you use that makes you more efficient?
Yeah, so I'm not great with tools, but I tell you, I'm using the beta version of Mailbox, which is made by the Dropbox guys, and I have to say that this is the first email productivity software that's actually working for me. So I'm pretty excited about that, actually. And what's interesting is it's not really the technology as much as what is that productivity tool that's actually going to change your behavior, because it's really about changing behavior. And so this Mailbox app, so far, so good for me. But I also think that those things are so dependent upon how an individual works that there's probably a bunch of different programs that work differently for people. But that's one to check out. I also use Dropbox. And it's not made by the same people, even though it's got a similar name, but that's a task management. And that one's pretty good. And then there's another one that's a Nimble that I'm using for my CRM and my pipeline management. And that it's not perfect, but it's pretty easy to use. And I'm really, everybody's kind of about ease of use these days, or you really, you don't fire it up in the morning. So that's another one I would check out if you've got contacts that you need to manage and a pipeline you need to manage. I also like one of my hacks for people that are trying to do customer development is meetup.com. I don't know if meetup.com's big over
It
there
is. It
yet,
is.
but in the US, yeah, there's thousands of meetups here in every city. And think about a market segment in this way. A market segment, people that share the same pain or passion and speak the same language. And by speak the same language, I mean that they're willing to refer to each other to solve that problem or address that passion. What's great about Meetup is all of those meetups are essentially people self-selecting that they're in the same market segment. Because by definition, people are organizing meetups around a shared pain or passion. So everybody should check out, and even do this outside your city. Check out meetup.com and see if somebody is organizing a meetup around the product that you hope to build or that you are building. And now you've automatically got, a captured group of people that you can reach out to do customer development, to see if they'd be willing to take a survey, to see if they'd be willing to try out your product. So that's my tip of the day.
How about habits? Do you have any habits that you use through your day, or you try to develop some habits that makes you more efficient?
Yeah, I'm really bad about that too. I think some of the things that I do is that I actually try to do all of my Monday morning work on Sunday, because I find that Mondays brings in so much work that if I don't do it Sunday, I'm behind. And so there's a feeling of accomplishment I get that I can go to bed and rest, right? If I get myself done on Sunday, I sleep better. I'm not anxious about all of the stuff I need to do Monday. And so then Monday morning feels a little bit less stressed when all this new stuff rolls in and I'm not trying to accomplish things that were on my task list before. The second thing is that now with this mailbox, I'm really trying to stick with inbox zero. And that doesn't mean that all my emails have been read. That means they're out of my inbox. And so I'm taking an action on every single email. I'm trying. I'm not perfect, but I'm better than I was. And it could be that I'm just saying, send me that email again in 8 hours. Or it could be, here's something that I need to schedule. It's a meeting that I need to schedule. So I'm not necessarily doing the final action, but I've made some mental calculation on every email. And the beauty of it is that you just get rid of all of the junk so quickly that then you go back to those emails that come back again, or in your to scheduled or your to follow-up folder. You now have sort of a manageable number of emails and a manageable number of tasks that you have to go tackle. So I guess those are the two of the biggest things that are working for me right now. But Ahmed, if I talk to you in a week, they'll probably have changed. So.
Most important factors for success in 3 words.
Perseverance, self-awareness. How do I make this into one word? Value creation.
Top 3 apps that you use on your smartphone, if you use a smartphone.
Smartphone apps would be like probably my bank account, my banking app.
Is that because you
Email.
make a lots of money, or why?
No, it's because I got to make sure that I'm not going into the red. I think. But that's true. I can skip that if you want. But it's banking. Actually, banking, Twitter probably, and email.
What do you do when you are depressed and you want to change your mood?
I actually think it's okay to be depressed. So I think it's a normal human emotion. And so I actually will allow it to go on for a little while, but not too long. Because then there's a difference between feeling sorry for yourself and being depressed. And so if it gets into sort of feeling sorry for yourself, you need to get yourself out of that. But I think part of being self-awareness and trying to improve yourself is also it will come with a little bit of sadness and maybe regret. And so I think that it's good to digest that, not spend too much time with it, and then see if you can turn it into a positive. I think that being around family to me gets me out of that. And then I also think, I play I play basketball and I play soccer or football. And so I think that exercise is really important for me to stay out of that. I think I feel good after exercise. So I think having a couple of tricks or a couple of those type of things that will get you out of your funk, get out of, being too self-aware, being too self-absorbed, and going and spending time with friends, family, getting some exercise, doing something that you enjoy doing. I like to say I'm like a Labrador. I have to chase a ball in order to get exercise. And so it's like
competition.
Is there?
So you don't get bored like in the gym or.
Right. Well, and have you ever seen anything happier than a Labrador chasing a ball? I mean, so it's, I actually think it's something human, something innate. So that's how I've discovered that's how it makes me happy. So
top 3 favorite books.
Well, so I mentioned 2. If I stay nonfiction, if I stay business, it would be, Crossing the Chasm, Innovator's Dilemma, and Eric's Lean Startup book are probably sort of the most 3 inspirational books for me.
3 people that you're inspired by the most.
I don't know. I feel like I feel like I always fail on these type of questions. I don't know. Martin Luther King. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. My father. And I don't know. My daughters, actually.
What makes you really happy?
I think it's actually spending time with my daughters is probably what makes me happiest. I've got amazing kids. They're their own human beings, and I really do think that it's not cliche. I really do think I learn from them, it's really special.
Last question: how people can contact you?
Yeah, so I really urge people to reach out to me. I will respond to all emails and that sort of thing. So the best way to get a hold of me, you can just Google Brant Cooper. I'm sort of all over, but at Brant Cooper on Twitter, Brant Cooper on LinkedIn, and my email, brant@brantcooper.com. So it should be pretty easy to find me.
Thank you so much for this interview, Brant. Really appreciate your time and the information that you have shared with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out, and it was a fun conversation.
Thanks, everyone. Be efficient and stay efficient, and see you soon with another leading expert.